Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Gilbert, and I am here to talk about Metroid. Now, for a while, there have been a lot of rumors flying around about the next title in the Metroid franchise. A lot of people seem to agree that Retro Studios should make a fourth Metroid Prime title. That would be an awful idea, though, at least in my opinion. Now, please keep in mind that despite what I'm about to say, all of the Metroid Prime games are absolutely fantastic. The problem with the Prime series, though, is that as it went on, it felt less and less like Metroid. Case in point, most people seem to agree that the best Metroid Prime game is the first one. Why do you think that is? It's because Metroid Prime is based on Super Metroid, which is hands down the best Metroid game you will ever play. Ultimately, though, it's not as good as Super Metroid. It still does an excellent job of bringing the Metroid formula into 3D, but there are one or two exceptions. You see, the problem is that while the Prime games got the combat, the upgrades, and the movement down, its exploration pales in comparison to Super Metroid's. The biggest reason for that is that there aren't very many alternate paths you can take. You won't find any fake walls that'll show you a hidden shortcut between areas, and there aren't really a whole lot of things you can do to sequence break. Now, sequence breaking, of course, is a huge part of what makes Metroid, Metroid. And somehow, Retro Studios didn't get this memo, because future versions of Metroid Prime were fixed to remove many of the sequence breaks that players were using. The best example I can give of this are the sequence breaks leading up to the plasma beam. In the original Metroid Prime, once you got the ice beam, you could take advantage of the geography in the geothermal core in order to jump to the rotating platforms. You could then do the puzzle like normal, going through the spinners, jumping to the next platform, and even taking the spider ball track to get to the plasma beam. This made getting to the Phazon mines, or not getting to, but going through the Phazon mines a lot easier, because with the plasma beam, you could sequence break a power bomb upgrade in the Phendrana drifts. So once you got to the Phazon mines, you could pretty much just go straight through. There are a couple other things you'd have to, go back for, but more or less it was a single pass. In the Trilogy version, though, the pillar, which is key to the sequence break that allows you to make the jump, was removed. Also, they added a pile of Bendesium, meaning you need power bombs, in front of the door, thus forcing you to follow the path that Retro Studios wants you to take. And that makes every playthrough pretty much exactly the same, and you don't have the option of a different path. In all the times Nintendo has re-released the original Metroid games, never have they tried to remove or restrict a player's ability to sequence break. Did you take advantage of the mock ball glitch in Super Metroid on the SNES? Well, guess what? You can still do that glitch on the Wii U version that you can download from the eShop. In fact, Nintendo didn't even fix the misspelling of Gunpei Yokoi's name in the credits of Super Metroid. On the other hand, Retro Studios has taken every opportunity to alter the Metroid Prime games. Removing sequence breaks is probably the biggest sin against Metroid committed by Retro Studios, though it isn't the last. The second biggest problem I have with the Trilogy version of Metroid Prime is that they changed the story. In the original, there was some room for interpretation, but in the Trilogy version, it's all laid out exactly as is, and there's nothing to discuss. The best example that I can give of this are the logs that the Chozo leave on Talon 4. In the original, it's implied that the Chozo sort of leave by ascending to a higher plane of existence, becoming beings of pure energy and thought. In the Trilogy version, though, they never actually leave. They just stay there, and even though it's implied that they start to get the ability to see the future, it's significantly downplayed. What's more, all references of them recognizing that it's Samus that is going to be fighting the threats on Talon 4, or anytime they simply think about Samus in these logs, are completely removed. Instead, they're replaced by the Chozo just kind of hoping a savior will appear and they're calling that savior the Entrusted One. There is one log in the Trilogy version in which they mention seeing a light that coalesces into the figure of a woman, but they don't actually associate this image with Samus. Another log mentions them seeing a human, but again, they don't actually connect that to Samus. And that's not really an improvement. I liked that they referred to Samus referred to her appearing in their dreams and that kind of stuff. That was cool. The worst part about all these changes is that they were entirely unnecessary. Sure, the original story had a plot hole or two, but I'd rather they have addressed them with as little change as possible. Instead, they completely rewrote the story. The Trilogy version story never even explains all the weapons and abilities that Metroid Prime uses in its first form. Those were actually weapons that the space pirates were trying to use to contain it that Metroid Prime took for itself. I also fail to see how not allowing the Chozo logs to contain any direct reference to Samus is an improvement. But honestly, I digress. Those are the biggest changes to Metroid Prime. Outside of the change to controls, of course, but, you know, that's obvious and that's not necessarily a good or bad change depending on your viewpoint. Fortunately, though, as far as I'm aware, Metroid Prime 2 remained mostly unchanged. At the very least, there's nothing about the game, about the Trilogy version, that sticks out as being all that different from the original GameCube version. Prime 2 has its own problems, though. The biggest one being that it's even more linear than Metroid Prime 1. And worse yet, Prime 2 can be extremely tedious to play through, especially if you're going for 100% scans and item pickups. Prime 2 also breaks the mold by introducing Umos, a sentient, friendly, and still very much alive character that you can directly interact with. He kinda breaks the feeling of isolation that normally is supposed to come with a Metroid game. Though, ultimately, he doesn't really bother me that much, mostly because his presence is overshadowed by the linearity and tediousness that is Metroid Prime 2. And even with him there, your ship is still damaged and you can't leave the planet until it's repaired. I also have to mention the beam ammo system, because it really doesn't fit the Metroid formula, especially when you consider that neither the dark beam or the light beam are powerful enough to warrant being restricted by ammo, and the Annihilator beam even less so since it's weaker than both of those. One sequel, and already the Prime series doesn't feel as much like Metroid. But still, when it comes to feeling less like Metroid, Prime 3 easily is the worst offender. Not only is the feeling of isolation gone, because you're regularly interacting with other characters, not only is there no way to sequence break, but we find ourselves, as Samus, being ordered around by the Galactic Federation as if Samus was one of their regular soldiers. She's supposed to be a bounty hunter, so much for that, I guess. In my opinion, here's how this scene should have gone.
We must rid the other AUs of that virus and bring the network back online. That's where you come in. We need you to deliver the vaccine to each of the AUs in this system.
Gonna cost you plenty.
We'd also like you to investigate the pirates' activity in the area. You need to know what they're up to.
Gonna cost even more.
Want to explore at your own pace? Too bad. You go where you're told, when you're told. The only time you're actually allowed to break out of that and go off on your own is when you were notified about the wreckage of the GFS Valhalla. Even then, though, you're limited by how much you can explore that place based on how many energy cells you've collected, and ultimately it's somewhere you will have to go to complete the game. Overall, as time went on, Retro just seemed to completely forget what Metroid is all about, and they proved that they don't really understand the feel of a Metroid game. It's to the point that I have no idea what Prime 4 would be like. and I'd rather not find out. And you know what, that's really a lie. I feel like Prime 4 might be even worse than Prime 3 in the regards of interacting with other characters. I heard a rumor that Retro wanted to add a playable Chozo character that would follow Samus around. Now, that was only a rumor and never substantiated, and nothing has come out about it since, but still, it's not something I would like to see introduced to a Metroid game starring Samus. Now, of course, everything I've just said is only my opinion, and I'm sure many of you will disagree with me, despite the reasons that I've laid out. And sure, Nintendo hasn't really done much better since they released Metroid Other M, which many of you will wrongfully accuse Team Ninja for, when in actuality, Yoshio Sakamoto from Nintendo is the one who was in complete control of the project. He controlled the story, and he's the one who told Team Ninja what to do. Anyway, whether or not you agree or disagree with me, feel free to leave your thoughts out in the comments below. I would very much look forward to reading them. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching. See you later.